My name is Jake. Welcome to the channel. I want to talk about my experience this last year of retiring early from my 9-to-5 job and living off of my dividend portfolio. I've talked about this for the last couple of years that my goal was always to reach financial independence with dividend investing. Many of you have probably heard about the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. There's many different schools of thought of how you could approach financial independence. Some people achieve this through real estate. They have 5, 6, 7 rental properties and they're kind of, a property manager on the side. Other people, they do the traditional route with the 4% rule where they have 25 times their annual expenses in the stock market and then they withdraw 4% of their portfolio balance each year to pay for their living expenses. I think you're going to relate to my story if you're a normal person, you're working a 9-to-5 job, and you have this dream of one day living off of your dividend portfolio. So in this video, I'm going to share my real thoughts on the highlights, the lowlights, the finances that come with retiring early in our particular situation, and my biggest takeaways that I think will help a lot of you who are pursuing financial independence and want to retire early with your dividend portfolio. But yeah, if you're new, once again, my name is Jake. I talk a lot about the simple path to wealth with dividend investing while focusing on the core and satellite approach, which is mostly made up of, high quality dividend growth stocks. I talk a lot about that on my channel. So if this is the first video that you're watching, that's what I usually talk about. I'm not the biggest fan of trying to time the market. I'm more of a buy and hold investor. But if you do decide to time the market, it's important to just expect the unexpected. I think we can all agree with that. Well, that is unless you have insider knowledge. But I mean, we can't all be Nancy Pelosi and members of Congress and buy stocks right before they go up. But if we could, it would look a little like this. Oh my gosh. Oh, I love it. I love it. All right, cool. So I'm going to talk about 4 things. I'm going to talk about the highlights, the lowlights. I'm going to talk about our finances, how we're able to do this. And I'm going to talk about some things that, my major takeaways from this last year. If you're trying to pursue FIRE, I think there's some things that may be of help to you. So the first thing that I want to start with is the highlights. So the last, 7, 8, 9 years of my life have been, on overdrive, right? I've been working 6 to 7 days a week these last couple of years, and it was a lot. Like I would work my 9-to-5 job Monday through Friday. I do my real estate investing. I did a DIY. I did everything myself. I did that on Saturdays. And then on Sunday, I would record YouTube videos. And I've done that for about the last 4 years. And my big goal when trying to pursue financial independence, the big thing for me was I wanted to decelerate my life. I was always on the go, like go, 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 go. I worked in big cities. I used to live in Munich. I worked at big software companies in Munich. I lived in Denver. I lived in Austin, major cities where it's just hustle, 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 go, go, go. I'm originally from a smallish town in northern Utah. And I didn't really grow up with that mindset, that go, go, go mentality. And I always missed that. And so I always wanted to come back to this decelerated life. So that was the highlight for me this year when I was no longer working my 9 to 5 job is I decelerated my life by almost 100%. That was always my goal. I went from working 7 days a week to about 1.5 days a week. Another highlight from this last year was it allowed me to focus on a simple lifestyle and nothing glamorous. Because we reached barista fire, we were still working, our expenses were higher than our income, so I still had to work on the side, i.e. YouTube, for example, and we had a pretty simple lifestyle. We didn't go on a lot of vacations. We didn't go out to eat a lot, here and there, but we didn't really spend a lot of money. It was just a very, very simple life. And with that came more time with our family. So we went on a lot more small little trips. We went hiking in the summer here in Utah. We went hiking a couple of times a week. That was such an incredible time. Getting to hike with my son Lucas, going on a hike with him for the first time. He's 2, by the way. So he was going strong at 2 years old. That was incredible. Lucas, you did it.
I did it.
I did it.
I did it.
Also, I got to spend more time on myself. I got to cook more at home. I got to focus more on eating healthier, focus on that kind of stuff. Exercising. I actually got to exercise again. Before the pandemic, I was the 5 a.m. guy, waking up at 5 a.m., going to the gym. I did that for many, many years. Since the pandemic, I kind of stopped doing that. In fact, I stopped entirely. And so starting to do that again has been really nice. Focusing on my own hobbies, right? I love being on the internet. I'm a huge nerd, right? I play a lot of video games. This last year, played a lot of video games, and I plan on doing that again here in 2024. I just really, really enjoy it. The next thing here that was a highlight was we kept our house in Austin. We'd spent the last 6 years in Austin. If you've been following my channel, I guess very quickly, I spent about 10 years in Germany where I met my wife. I did my master's work there, and then I came back to the United States and we moved to Austin, and we had a house there, and we're keeping our house, and we moved up here to Utah where my parents are at, here in northern Utah. And so we've spent the last, 7 or 8 months or so here in Utah. And so that's been really, really a great experience. So I guess the highlight here was being able to come back to my parents while still keeping the house in Austin, because we're going to spend our time between Austin and Utah going forward. And this was especially important for me because I've been away from home for about the last 13 years. And I would always, I always thought I would come back home, but, I never really had any detailed plans until recently. And I would often read articles like this, that the sad truth is that by the time you're age 20, you've spent about 90% of your time with your parents. And I didn't want that. And I wanted to spend more time with my parents as, that was something that was important for us as well, so that Lucas, our son, could spend time with his grandparents and have that relationship. And so this is something that we really, really prioritize. Yeah, sure. I could have taken the money and gone on vacations and traveled more. Would have been annoying with a 2-year-old, but we still could have done that. But no, we decided that we wanted to come and spend time with my parents. And that was a very, very important decision for us. So I guess a quick recap with the highlights, really just, I got to decelerate my life, focus a lot more time on, on my family, on me, on my hobbies, and really just decide what I do with my time. No more 8 o'clock meetings, no more hour traffic in the morning driving to and from work. That was really, really an incredible thing here this year where I didn't have to go into an office, just a really, a simpler life. And I really, really enjoyed that. Now I want to talk about some of the lowlights that are, probably, unique to our situation. Maybe they'll be similar with you. What I've learned along the way is that there's no perfect path. Like everyone's got to find their own unique journey, and it's okay that it's not going to be perfect and glamorous. And ours was far from glamorous. So because I didn't decide when I was going to reach fire, I was a little bit unprepared for this whole experience. I'd always known that it was going to come up, but I was laid off from my job in January 2023. And that was a big shock because I was making good money and we weren't quite there yet. We weren't quite ready to pull the trigger yet. And, just to kind of give you a recap of, where I was at and what that meant financially, When I got my first job out of college, I was making $40,000 a year in Munich, Germany in 2013. And when my last year here in 2022, I was making $260,000 as a sales director. Overnight that vanished and we weren't quite ready yet. With that, I think the biggest lowlight that came with that is I'd been planning how I was going to say, hey boss, I'm sorry, but I quit. Hey, I've been planning for that moment where I got to take control and say, I quit. And I felt that was robbed of me. And I guess, I've that's really been with me this last year. And I don't think that's really ever going to go away. I'd always been hoping I had this perfectly planned out, this vision of, okay, once we reach fire, I'm going to call up my boss and say I quit. And it was me making the decision. And that I had the power when it came to that. It was me. I was buying my freedom. It didn't work out that way. And a year later, I'm still kind of, it bothers me. I almost want to get another job for a week just so I can quit and take back that power. But if you've never been in this experience, it might be hard to relate. But that really, really bothered me that I wasn't the one that pulled the trigger. Many of you will not be able to relate with that, but maybe some of you are out there that can relate to that. So when looking at my job over these last couple of years, despite not really, really loving my job, I thought it was okay. I worked with some really great people. I had some good bosses. I had some horrible bosses. One of my worst boss that I ever had, the worst boss that I ever had was in Denver, Colorado. He sucked so bad I had to leave and move across country to get a new job in Austin. It's the best thing that ever happened, but he was a POS. But I had other bosses, managers, directors that were amazing. But I guess what I'm trying to say is this last year, I did miss the recognition and purpose that came with my job. I'd worked there for the last 10 years. I went up the ranks from individual contributor all the way to manager to director. And I was in a management position, and I would tell, I'd have teams of dozens of people, and I would have to make decisions on behalf of the team and tell the team, where we're going, why we're doing this. And I would tell dozens of, I'd work with a lot of newer, millennials and younger Gen Zers, and I'd have to tell a lot of them what to do and how to do their job. And then I went from that telling Gen Zers what to do to then no longer doing that and telling a 2-year-old what to do. And, ironically, my 2-year-old listens better than Gen Zers, but I digress. So with that came with, I would interact with dozens of people on a regular basis to interacting pretty much with no one. I'm a pretty big introvert. I tend to keep to myself because I've moved around so much these last 10, 15 years. It's been very difficult to make friends and keep relationships with people because I've always been moving. And it's, that's been a little bit of a challenge, but my wife's a bigger introvert than I am. So we figure things out and it works out okay. But that's very unique to me. It may be very different for you, right? You may have a huge social network outside of work that you're fine with. But that was not the case for me. Another low light here, something that I noticed this last year was I sometimes felt guilty for being lazy. Waking up at like 10, 11 o'clock in the afternoon. You can't really flip a switch where, from one day to the next, you're hugely ambitious, right? And then the next day, okay, you're going to just take it easy and do that for an extended period of time. Most people who are pursuing fire, they tend to work very hard. They're very ambitious. They're kind of a different mindset on life. They really want to accomplish things. And then once that's gone, it's like, okay, well, what's next? So once you stop working, you may feel guilty, or at least I did. I felt a little guilty for not having a schedule or not being in that hamster wheel. And I think honestly, I think it's just being brainwashed by the system, that you're brainwashed, the American way of working until you die, hustle, hustle, hustle. I have to kind of rewire my brain to not think like that, because I think, other countries outside of the US are not really wired like that. Here in the US, we're wired to consume, 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 get into debt and work, 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 and then die. And I don't think it's like that in other parts of the world. So I'm trying to relearn that part. Another low light here is, so my wife is still working. Thank goodness, it's helped with our finances for sure. But she's still been working, right? And so we haven't been able to have, full flexibility with our schedule because she is working, and, having a toddler, it's not always easy to travel. And with her working, we've been a little bit more confined to one place, so we haven't been able to go off, and we wouldn't have had the money anyways, to be very candid, but it would have been nice to have a little bit more flexibility to go and do stuff. But that was definitely a low light, because if you retire before your spouse, it's not as fun. I think, at least that's been my experience. If I could do it over, I would have much, much preferred to pull the trigger at the exact same time as my wife. I think that would have been a lot better. It would have been easier on her. It would have been easier on me. And I think, I don't know the other side, but that's only what I could imagine. Another low light here is that I spent a lot more money than expected. So it turns out when you have Thursday morning free, I tended to go to Costco a lot. And if you've noticed, Costco, it's gotten really, really expensive. Food prices have gotten expensive. So inflation is a thing. I tended to spend more money because I had more time. I'd usually take our little boy to Costco, and we go and like, oh, that's nice, let's get that. And then I look at the bill, it's like $500. I'm just like, that was our monthly budget in 1 week. And so I'm just like, kind of a shocker there. But yeah, that was a low light, not having the money to spend that I would have liked, because, when I was working my 9 to 5, I'd never go to Costco at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday. But this last year, that was like a weekly thing. I go on Thursday morning. It's still crowded, but, not as bad as at night or on the weekend. And so coming back to what I was saying earlier with this being, unexpected because I was laid off, I didn't quit on my terms. I found myself kind of second guessing myself quite a bit because I didn't have all the time to plan and make this perfect, as perfect as could be. This may not be the case with many of you, but it was kind of, a leap of faith here, not getting another job and going the barista fire route because the finances are still a little bit tight. I mean, I was originally planning on working for another 1.5 to 2 years. So this was a little bit interesting, some gymnastics with the finances, but I tended to, second guess myself on a few things. So that was one of the lowlights that I had, that there wasn't as much cushion as I would have liked when talking about, the finances. Another one here is, you probably won't relate to this if you don't follow the FIRE movement, but when I was thinking about this kept coming back and back to me. So while pursuing FIRE these last couple of years, I watched hundreds of hours of people telling their story, and how they retired and the importance of retiring to something versus from something. While you're working, you're mostly thinking about getting away from it, like leaving your job and gaining your freedom. You're not really thinking about, well, what are you going to do with your time? That usually comes later. And because I got laid off, I kind of was unexpected. I was still trying to figure out, well, what am I going to retire to? What is that going to look like? And when living this in practice, actually experiencing this, it was much easier said than done when it comes to, you just retire to something versus from something. And that is much easier said than done, has been my experience. The sense of purpose is something that is really, really important. And I'm kind of still trying to find that, like what that really is. Now, this has to do kind of with, unexpectedly getting laid off and not being able to pick when I retired. So maybe if you were in a different situation, that wouldn't be a big deal for you. I've been thinking about this for years. What am I going to retire to? I kind of know, before retiring, I had huge aspirations, right? Like I wanted to go to Hawaii. I wanted to go and do all these cool things. And now I'm learning to be more content with living a simple life, and one that I willingly and happily chose. But I can understand now why so many people are unhappy when they retire. If you don't have something to retire to, just not working is not enough. Sleeping in until 11 o'clock is not enough. It's great, but it's not enough. So those were some of the lowlights from my experience this last year. Some of them are probably going to be unique to our specific situation. They may not apply to you, but it's definitely something to think about. So now let's talk about the finances. On my YouTube channel, I'm pretty open. I mean, I've actually not shared really any of this information this last year or years. So I'm going to give some pretty detailed but generic numbers here so that you can kind of get an understanding of where we're at. My portfolio here in 2023, we generated about, with my portfolio, my wife's portfolio, we generated about $50,000 here in 2023. And in 2022, we generated $42,000 in annual dividend income. Now, it's not a really good comparison, these two numbers, because I was still funding my portfolio in 2022. So a much better comparison will be when we compare 2024's income to 2023, because we're no longer funding our portfolio. Okay, so does that make sense? The next part here, I've actually never really shared on YouTube before, but I thought it may be interesting for you to kind of see the reality of what it's kind of like here. And so I'm opening up my arms and welcoming you into my world of the finances here. So right now, our expenses are much higher because we live in the United States and healthcare is not free. Okay, so I'm going to break down, kind of our monthly expenses by main category. I'm not going to go into every detail. I'm not going to bore you with that, but just the main categories. So right now, our expenses are about $9,000 a month. $9,000. That's a lot. But when you break it down, you can kind of understand why. So our largest monthly expense is $4,000 for housing. That's housing in Austin and housing here in Utah. So we spend about $4,000 a month. And that includes everything, property tax, insurance, everything. Then we have what's called medical. And medical, we're going to be paying now, because my wife is still working, this is what we will be paying once the day that she quits here this year. But we project with the total out-of-pocket maximum. So the actual real number may be significantly lower, but we're planning with worst case scenario. I want to plan with worst case scenario. And worst case scenario with the premiums and the out-of-pocket maximums annualized over the whole year is $2,500. Now, in reality, it's probably going to be much lower than that if we don't have any medical, issues. And that $9,000 a month will actually go down significantly if we don't have any medical issues. But we're planning worst case scenario. Okay. So we need to make sure that we have at least $9,000 to cover that. The next is going to be food. Food inflation has been insane. Our monthly budget for food is about $1,500. That includes eating out. That includes the weekly Costco runs. That includes everything. So about $1,500 a month. And that's for my wife, myself, and our little boy, Lucas. All right, so where does this $9,000 come from? So $4,000 of that is coming from our dividend portfolio today. That's coming from my portfolio, the cash flow portfolio, my real estate portfolio that I've shared on the channel. The next portion is from YouTube. I've calculated about $1,500 from YouTube. Now, with YouTube, it greatly varies. The ad revenue can go up and down. The affiliate revenue that I get if you sign up to Seeking Alpha or M1 can greatly vary. Like some months I might get nothing, other months it might be a lot, right? So it really, really depends. But a conservative number, I think, is about $1,500 a month. That's what I'm hoping for. And you might look at other YouTubers that are making thousands and thousands of dollars. I don't have a Patreon. I don't sell a course. I don't flood my videos with ads. And so I could make a lot more money if I wanted, if I tried. If I put on the grifter hat, I'm sure I could make more money, but I've never wanted to do that. I always wanted to make my money from my W-2, from my job. And then, YouTube was always just a hobby because I never wanted YouTube to be my job. Right now it's a little unique because of the whole Barista Fire thing. But when I started this, I never wanted to be my job because I wanted to be free from the algorithm. I wanted to be free to make content that I wanted to make and not be subject or a slave to the algorithm and what YouTube was promoting. Okay. That was always so important to me. And I didn't want to be a YouTube finance pawn and just go with what YouTube is only promoting. So that was really, and I'm not bashing anybody that does that. That was just, for me, I just didn't want to do that. So here we are. The last piece here is I'm making about $3,500 from option premiums. Now, you're hearing this for the very first time if you follow my channel. Now, you might be scratching your head, well, what is that? Well, let me explain really quick. If you followed my channel, you know that I invested into rental properties in Austin, and I bought them and I sold them. I bought them in 2019. I sold them in 2022. Okay, I sold 2 of them. And the first house we sold, and then I just dumped it all into my portfolio. If you looked at my portfolio, you saw that massive spike. That was from the sale of one of my rental properties. There's another rental property if you followed my channel. I didn't invest that into my M1 portfolio. What I've done with that is I've kept that on the side, and I've been selling cash secured puts and cover calls with that money in a different brokerage. And because I'm not an expert on it, I don't share it on YouTube. I may in the future if there's interest, but I don't share it because I don't see myself as an expert. Okay. And so that's why I don't that's why I haven't really talked about it. But the monthly income can vary. It can be, 3,500. It could be all the way up to 10,000 in a month. But it really depends on the volatility in the market, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where, and I'm decided if I didn't lose my job at the beginning of 2023, I would have never gone the options route. I would have just dumped it all into my M1 portfolio. But because of this curveball that we were thrown, I'm rolling with the punches, and I've kind of pivoted in terms of my strategy with the options. And I'm only selling. I don't buy options. I don't gamble or anything like that. Like I truly just do it for passive income. So it's given me a little bit more flexibility to get a higher yield, higher amount of income, so that we can sustain our livelihood based off of our expenses. Okay. And so that's really why we did that. If there's questions, leave me a comment and I can kind of let you know on how I do it. Or if there's interest, I can make videos on it in the future. But once again, I'm not an expert. I've done it for the last about year and a half, and I've done pretty well. Okay, I want to end this video with sharing with you my biggest takeaways that I think may help you if you're pursuing FIRE. Now, I know I'm talking to a broad audience here. I'm talking to millionaires. I'm talking to people in poverty. I'm talking to people all across the globe. And I know many of you are in different situations. What's available to you may be completely different to someone else. And I want to take that into context when I share my thoughts when it comes to this. I've been pursuing FIRE for about 8-9 years, officially 7 years. Okay, for a long time. And what I've learned here this last year is, there's different stages of FIRE, right? You got lean FIRE, you got regular FIRE, you got barista FIRE, you got fat FIRE, and you got coast FIRE. I made a video on that. I'll leave that video. I'll have that video pop up at the end of this video, and you can watch that next, the different stages of FIRE. But what I've learned here this last year of being barista FIRE, where you're still working part-time and living off of your investments, I've learned that lean FIRE really shouldn't be your goal if you're trying to pursue financial independence and you want to truly retire early. There's really only a small exception here. That is, unless you never spend any money or you stay at home all day and that's what you do. Now, this is not going to be the case for everyone, obviously. But what I've noticed is that having experienced what I experienced this year, thinking about lean FIRE just gives me pain in my side just thinking about it. So if you're pursuing FIRE, I would highly, highly encourage you to not settle unless you have to on lean FIRE. Now with that, I think that barista FIRE, what I'm doing, or fat FIRE should be most people's goal. The reason for this is with barista FIRE, you're still active. You're still doing something on the side. You're still occupied with working and still doing something, right, with your time. With fat FIRE, it's kind of similar, but you can be a lot more active based off of your spending. You can spend more money. You can go and do more things. And it really comes down to how you spend your time. With barista FIRE, you're spending your time with still working. You're still doing something. With fat FIRE, you can go to Hawaii. You can go to Fiji. You can go on little trips here and there. You can do more. It really comes down to how do you spend your time. And I think most people in this digital world, this fast-paced world, I think lean FIRE, most people are going to struggle with that and ultimately be unhappy. And just remember that there's no one size fits all here. The best thing that you can do is make the best decision possible with the information that you have for you and your family and be content with that decision.
Please subscribe. Please subscribe.
You know what? I think we're gonna be friends. Can everyone say hi to my friend? That's crazy. I just wanted to say thanks. I'm glad you came along, partner.